This is StoryBeat, Storytellers on Storytelling, an exploration into how master storytellers and artists develop and build brilliant stories and works of art that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators of all kinds find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University in the heart of downtown Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a rating or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. Well, my guest today, multi-award-winning Brian Trenchard-Smith, is an Anglo-Australian film and television director, producer, and writer with a reputation for making large-scale movies on small-scale budgets. Quentin Tarantino referred to him in Entertainment Weekly as one of his favorite directors. Among Brian's credits are successes like The Man from Hong Kong, Siege of Firebase Gloria, Dead End Drive-In, which is a particular Tarantino favorite, BMX Bandits, which showcased a 15-year-old Nicole Kidman, Long Lost Son, Arctic Blast, The Cabin, Absolute Deception, and Drive Hard. Brian has also directed 43 TV episodes of such series as Silk Stalkings, Time Trax, 5 Mile Creek, The Others, and Flipper. Brian's debut novel, Alice Through the Multiverse, was recently published and is available at Amazon in paperback and Kindle. For those reasons and so many more, it's a truly fantastic honor and a real joy for me to have as my guest on StoryBeat today, Brian Trenchard-Smith. Brian, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's my great pleasure. So let's go and review a little bit about how you got to this point. What were your earliest inspirations and influences? What got you to start into making movies?
Well, I guess I was kind of an 11-year-old assistant projectionist at my first school. They would show 16-millimeter movies to the pupils once every 3 weeks. There would be a cartoon, generally a Popeye cartoon, occasionally a Disney cartoon, and then there would be an old film that was considered suitable for the 8 to 12-and-a-half-year-olds that attended the school. And a particular teacher ran the projector, and I was curious as to how it worked. And it was one of those projectors with carbon, it was an arc lamp projector,
really?
And with two carbons that had to be kept, close together, causing this very bright light that was then reflected through the projector onto the screen. As
Right.
well. Old-fashioned projector. I refer to it as his sort of, Frankenstein projector because he'd built it out of, half a dozen different parts. Anyway, I, started to learn how it worked and would learn how to thread up the 16-millimeter print and monitor the light level through the arc lamps. So that was my first experience, really, and watching the movie from the projector, which wasn't in a box; it was just at the back of the room.
Right.
And watching the audience reaction to it, my fellow pupils, I really liked the feeling of putting on a show. I wanted to entertain people, and in some way, just by keeping the projector bright enough, I was in some way contributing to the show, and so that was kind of the start of it. And then I moved on to getting an 8-millimeter camera when I was in my early teens and making little 8-millimeter films.
8-millimeter or Super 8?
Yeah. And finally, as at the age of 17, my second school was a British public school called Wellington College.
Right.
They actually commissioned me to make a year-long record of the school's activities that would be shown to the parents of prospective pupils and whatever. And that little 40-minute 8mm film got me my first, tiny little professional job, editing some 16mm film for actually my then girlfriend's father, who had some footage that he needed organized that his company had taken, and so I duly organized it, and that was really the first job I got paid for.
So I want to go back a half a step here. You say you made a 40-minute movie at what age?
17 through 18.
That's impressive.
Well, I would record certain activities that the school did. There were nearly 700 boys, and we had a cadet corps, so that allowed me to film a battle scene with 20 guys and throwing thunder flashes and firing blanks, etc. I had a squad overrun a trench line. That was something I wanted to do, which is obviously based upon war movies that I had seen by that age. But this was a record of all aspects of the school's curriculum, and basically what life would be like for a pupil at that school 7 months of the year, which they would be spending as a boarder, so the school was reasonably, I think, very happy with it. I shot it on 8mm film. I edited the film together. Then I created a synchronized music track to play on a tape recorder, pressing the button at exactly the right time to synchronize with the first image as the film was projected. I lifted music from long-playing records of epic music scores that I had liked. I collected music scores in those days. I had Spartacus and Ben-Hur and the epics of the time.
Sure.
Totally inappropriate, really, soundtrack, but I don't know, must have given it quite a surreal quality. So I handed over the film and the tape recording to the school after it was duly presented, and they showed it a number of times, I guess, over the next few years, and then unfortunately it got lost. So my very first work it cannot be found. But that's okay. I knew at the age of 13, after I'd seen Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo,
right,
that what I wanted to do was make films, and it sort of came to me like a sort of eureka moment after as the film closed, that when I would leave school in 5 years' time, I would have to do what adults do, which is work for a living.
Yes.
And it occurred to me that people got paid to make these films. That was a genuine job, and I thought, right, okay, that's the job I want. So I will duly try and get it.
And so you have, it in spades.
I had no idea how difficult that would be, but I just lucked out. I was in the right place at the right time at various key moments from over the next few years. So I consider myself very fortunate, and I think if I was an 18 to 20-year-old right now wanting to get into the film business, and I'd made a short film on my cell phone, etc., it would be a lot harder now than it was for me back when I first started looking for a job in 1964, which to some of your younger listeners must seem like the Jurassic era. But
why would it be harder?
It was certainly an interesting era. I feel I have had. I've been privileged enough to work in the business during probably its last golden age.
Brian, why would it be harder?
Well, I think the number of opportunities to make a professional-looking feature film and get it seen by people have shrunk. The business has become intensely corporatized, and the number of outlets that you could go to get a film funded has shrunk, and it's all based upon distribution. And there's been a complete upheaval in the way what is now referred to as content is shown, and we're seeing the streaming services, streaming platforms are more and more the way people see anything other than the big blockbusters. Certainly, there are Oscar nominated and winning films at the end of the year that people flock to see in the cinema, and there will always be a desire to be in a darkened room with a whole lot of other people experiencing something on the screen without interruption. And people will always go to a hall of public entertainment in order to have that experience. But it's no longer what cinema was when I was growing up, or as a very young man. I could go to a movie in England for 2 shillings and 6pence back when I was 18, 19. But now, if you want to go to the movies, you look at the ticket price, and obviously perhaps it's less in Pittsburgh than it is in Los Angeles. I'm in Portland, but it's no longer the same kind of experience. But your question really pertains to people getting into the business.
Yes.
I suppose it's the same. It has been the same for generations. First of all, you have to have a piece of material that the experts in the business think people will pay to see. So you have a script that has either a totally engrossing story, and if you just put this on the screen, people will flock to see it. But it also has to have a star. I'm sure you can make a film with with an unknown cast, and many a successful horror film has done that because
Correct.
It's the horror that is the star,
yeah.
And the prosthetic makeup and whatever. But generally, you have to have someone that the public respond to as a key character in the film. So there is quite a process that you have to go through to get your film funded. So it's that in my young day, certainly growing up as I did ultimately in Australia. I grew up in England, but I then moved to the land of my father when I was just 19, turning 20, and I went to Australia,
right,
where there was no film industry, but there were 3 commercial television networks as well as a government network, and it was an expanding business, and so I was able to get in initially as a news film editor, touting my editing ability as described earlier. And in those days in Australia, if you were keen, if you were volunteered to do things, people gave you a shot. If you fell on your face, then, well, they didn't give you a shot quite so easily the next time. But if you succeeded, they're great. And consequently, before my, at the age of 21, by volunteering, I became a junior executive at a television station in Sydney, and was given the opportunity to make promos for the upcoming new season's programming that would open at the very beginning of February each year, when the ratings would start. The ratings would have ceased from the end of October, for somewhere in mid-November, perhaps sometimes, and then they would start again in February with new programming, both from Britain, America, and some new programming actually created in Australia. And that was where I wanted to go and get into that new programming and get to make programs myself. But I had a sort of a circuitous route to do that. But
right.
Anyway, I volunteered for promos. The promos that I made were successful, possibly because I kind of concentrated on sex and violence in the extracts that I chose, and I was considered to have done a great job. And when I announced that I was going to go back to England via Japan and America to broaden my understanding of television entertainment by visiting TV studios and so forth, and then they said, "Well, look here. Here's a reel of your stuff. Take on 16 millimeter." Well, they transferred it from tape to 16 mil, and that'll help you, demonstrate your skills, and that worked because an American company saw what I had done when I visited them in Hollywood, and they said, "We have a trailer making department in the UK, and they might be looking for a new writer-producer of trailers. Would you, why don't you go along and be interviewed?" I was duly interviewed and hired by National Screen Service in London to make trailers for them, and I made some 25 trailers, including Hammer Horrors and Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West. I made the trailer for that,
wow.
which you can find on YouTube.
Wow.
And so that getting into trailers on that level, on the feature film level, as opposed to television in a relatively small population country like Australia at that time. That was a great help, and it all came out of volunteering and seeing an opportunity and trying to fill it as soon as I saw it. So that the trailer making was very very educational as well about marketing of movies, and so I learned a lot as a result of that. But eventually, the Australian Television Network said, "Please come back and make some more promos for us," and we're moving into color TV. I mean, this may astonish some of your listeners. What? No, there wasn't. There was a television that was not in color. Yes, no, it was black and white television in Australia right until
same here.
4, I think. But they said, "Come back," and I said, "Well, I will. I'll give up this trailer-making career in England, but you have to give me programs to make." And that is how, it would never happen, I think, today. That is how I made the lateral move from promotion and advertising material to production of actual entertainment. And I got a lot of interesting things to make. Initially, there were I produced beauty quest shows like Quest of Quests. I mean, it's a dirty job, but someone's got to do it. And I'm sure these things are all they are politically incorrect now.
Do you
pageants, and I understand that.
Brian, do you feel
anyway,
as if
that
being
was the start? So next question.
Yes, do you feel as if the editing process that you learned early on held you in good stead as you started to direct?
Absolutely. Some of the best directors of classic films started as
Absolutely.
editors. David Lean, for instance, he was an editor.
Sam Peckinpah, Hal Ashby.
There are numerous. Hal Ashby was an editor. I could go. There's a long list, and editing is it's the grammar and syntax of cinema language. It's what order do you arrange your images in, and how is this image compatible with the next image? Will it flow? Will the succession of images flow smoothly so you completely understand geography, where you are, where the characters are, how the characters relate to each other, and where they move to in the scene. What are the points of emphasis in the scene? What lines should actually get a close-up because they're of that importance? What lines should be quite happily played in a master shot, or preferably a moving master shot, because I do like to move the camera.
You do. You like to move the camera a lot.
Yes,
and I think it's a hallmark.
I don't want to have a camera that seems to be suffering from Saint Vitus's dance, and the invisible man with hiccups is somehow observing the scene. I think that's obtrusive and potentially takes the audience out of the movie or out of the story. So you have to sort of get the happy medium between allowing the scene to work in its own right, and the level of visual enhancement that you give it, the degree to which you perhaps subordinate the scene to style as opposed to substance.
Right.
It's a delicate balance, but I think camera movement generates energy. Good editing will generate energy. I don't like machine gun editing in fight scenes where it's a blizzard of contrasting long lens shots.
Right.
Some of which, sometimes that kind of staging is to disguise the fact that the fighters have only got have, let's say, limited skill to be able to do, certain movements only in individual shots. You look at some, the best, let's say, Chinese, movies in the classic period, and you see, the athleticism that is depicted in long, flowing camera movements, where you actually see the guys, they're really doing it, and so it's not created with the magic of editing, let's say. I've always found it important to that seeing is believing, let's say, and I've tried to apply that to action staging as well in my sort of stunt movie period.
Well, I've seen 4 of your movies recently. In fact, over the weekend.
You're a glutton for punishment.
I saw Dead End Drive-In over the weekend and thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, it's a very interesting and unique concept for a story. And you also, I'm going back to your statement about directing action. You obviously love and know how to direct action. What would you say are the hallmarks of making a good action scene work?
Well, I would say that although you might have a vast battle taking place, the audience is primarily interested in what the characters involved in that battle are feeling and reacting to what is going on around them. So, just clever choreography of carnage and mayhem is all well and good up to a point, but unless you focus it through the eyes of the relevant characters, good guys, bad guys, whatever, you will not be serving the drama as well as you should. So never lose sight of, or never lose touch with that central character who is involved in an action scene. So you need to know how he or she is thinking and feeling at key moments within the spectacle, let's say.
It's all point of view. It's all perspective on how that action is taking place then.
That's right. And again, you have to sort of keep making the audience worry about the characters they care about and how they will, or in some cases obviously will not, escape their fate. And so you have to constantly emphasize the proximity of the danger that they face in whatever action scene it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Would you say that you're best known for action movies?
I would say so, yes. I mean, I'm a bit hard to categorize because I am, in fact, multi-generic.
Yeah, true.
I like every genre known to man and a few that are, hard to categorize. I can turn my hand to anything. You want me to, shoot a Shakespeare play in modern dress, let's say, in existing locations, or shoot it in period locations. I can do that without any difficulty. At the same time, I can do a raucous, oddball comedy, I've studied cinema since I was a child, and I understand what makes each genre work, and I understand the various styles that are available to a filmmaker with which he will make the relevant film. So it's simply a matter of considering the script in relation to similar pictures in the past in the same genre. How do we make this version of a familiar story fresh, or fresher at least? The public do like formulas; they just want a different twist each time.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to sort of bring my sort of experience and a knowledge and understanding of how various films work and what seems to work for their respective audiences, and so I try to bring that to each new project. I like genre cocktails. I like a film that maybe blends two genres together.
Sure. One of the things that I've been teaching screenwriting for the last almost 9 years in Pittsburgh, and one of the things that we emphasize is studying genre and different genres. Without knowing those genres, by watching a lot of movies, reading a lot of scripts and stories, you don't understand how the mechanics of each genre work.
Yeah, no, it takes a while to get that, but I just have my mind is life is a movie, or so it seems to me. I see lots of things in terms of their movie potential, and things I might walk down the street and observe something, little human interaction going on, and I think, oh, well, that could be an interesting scene. Or I visit a place of architectural grandeur, and I think, wow, I'd like to get a camera on this place sometime.
Sure.
So everywhere I go is a potential location. And how would I photograph it? Oh, well, it would look good from here in morning light, and so on. So, that's kind of how my mind works, which is not for everybody.
No.
But it works for me.
Well, speaking of doing stories in a different way, let's talk for a moment. We'll come back to filmmaking, but let's talk for a moment about writing your book, Alice Through the Multiverse. What triggered you to write Alice Through the Multiverse?
Well, I initially wrote it as a screenplay under the title of The Executioner's Daughter. And it was optioned for quite good money twice. But we could never get Keira Knightley or Scarlett Johansson or any of the sort of young 20-ish female stars that had an international profile. We could never, get them without, let's say, a firm pay-or-play offer. But until we could get, an actor of that stature to play the leading role, and then no doubt surround her with solid guest stars, we couldn't get the picture financed, and it was not made. It was to be independently financed and shot in Europe, and it was not something that agents encourage their stars to do. I mean, at the time, both these ladies were like 20-ish, early 20s, and so. As far as the agents are concerned, the better, if you're going to do genre, do studio genre. It's better paid, and then you're guaranteed a release. But if you do one of these independent genres, you might end up direct to video, and that will damage your price and therefore my commission. As far as the next project is concerned, if it's considered that your value has dropped, so. That was, that's one of the things that that right now is, makes it ever harder for new filmmakers to get some traction, because the sought-after stars are bombarded with projects, and their advisors recommend which ones they should take, and try and extract as much money as possible, and sometimes you'll get 50% of a budget is going into paying the stars, and whatever's left is what you get to make the movie with.
Right.
And that there are quite a few films where you can really see that the economy of the film has let's say been a bit skewed. That way, and the film doesn't really have the production value and the staging that the subject matter requires, because so much of the money has gone into the above-the-line component of the budget.
Sure.
Anyway, back to Alice. So after a while, the rights returned to me, and I put it aside, but it kept gnawing at my liver. I just, I just saw, this film was still playing in my head, so I decided to novelize it, and duly did. And Alice, I gave it a title that was less historical and more paranormal. In essence, Alice is, a young girl who believes she is the daughter of a 16th century executioner, and suddenly she wakes up in a contemporary psychiatric institution.
Yeah.
Is she actually crazy, or has some kind of past life swap taken place, and she is now inhabiting the body of one of her subsequent descendants, and vice versa. has the girl, also been transported, the modern girl, been transported to the past. I mean, you've seen these kind of time paradox films and television shows like, Outlander being one. I've only recently caught up with Outlander, and I wrote this initially in 2004.
Wow.
And novelized it subsequently in more recent years. But it's I guess a past life swap story where both parties find themselves caught up in similar political conspiracies and are ill-equipped to deal with them, and yet because of the central smartness and nobility of the character, they're able to overcome the necessary obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
The book has an ending I don't think that anyone is predicting, and I'll be interested in, if you do read the book, in your opinion. But there are some nibbles at the moment for it as a potential series on a streaming platform.
That'd be great.
It's all just polite conversation at the moment. So much of what goes on is polite conversation that never actually comes to fruition.
Yes.
So I'm not holding my breath.
That's the
but it's
that's
an
the
ideal
business.
vehicle for a series.
So let's talk about
we'll
let's talk about the writing of it. You wrote the screenplay first and then novelized it. How obviously you know how to create a story. What differences are there in writing the novel than writing the script?
Well, obviously you can expand every character's backstory and aspects of their character through another paragraph of prose. If you do that in a screenplay, the audience never sees or hears it. It has to be what the characters say and do on the screen.
Absolutely.
And the screenplay should stick as much as possible to, giving the reader that information as quickly as possible. Long, florid descriptions of the landscape or the mansion or whatever don't really work in a screenplay, but they do work to a degree in a novel. You set the scene. The audience is not watching it on the screen; they're watching it in their imagination.
Yeah.
Alice Through the Multiverse is basically it's a movie in prose with a lot of with a much deeper look at all the characters, so that the audience can understand them better. So should it ever become a series, we would need to get that level of depth into the writing of the series. And that's one of the great things about these streaming series is that you can do things at much greater length than you can for a 2-hour movie, and so you can really explore character that way. So I've tried to give to really flesh out the edges and the corners of each scene in the novel, though the novel is very fast-paced. I mean, I've designed it to be a page-turner,
right,
where every 2 or 3 pages you say, what? Ooh, really? Okay, read on. So, because, the central character is frequently, sent unexpectedly back and forth without any control over the ability to return to one time zone or the other. So there are surprises and cliffhangers throughout, as there would be should it be filmed. But essential differences, I suppose, between.
So, all right. So when you're starting to write a new script or you're coming up with a new story, do you usually have the story worked out?
Alice, I had I woke up one morning. I have wild dreams, and I don't always remember them, but occasionally I do. And I had this dream in which there seemed to be some kind of medieval execution being about to take place, and then a riot breaks out. And particularly, I just remember the man announcing the execution suddenly gets an arrow in the mouth as he opens his mouth to read the official pronouncement, and a riot breaks out. And then suddenly there's this young girl, teenager, running from the site, and now there's a thunderstorm and pouring rain and lightning. And as she runs away, pursued by three men, into this very fierce storm, she slips and falls and rolls onto a hard surface, and she sees two giant eyes moving towards her, and she, these two giant eyes stop right in front of her, but then this beast proves, to be in fact, what we would recognize as a 2020, Toyota Land Cruiser, and she faints. And that little flash was all I could sort of remember. In fact, I don't know what car it was in the dream, but I've since made it that. And I thought, this is an interesting premise, and I should do something with this. And I scribbled down a few notes of what I could remember. And at that time, we were living in Westwood, Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And my wife was in the doctoral program at UCLA, and therefore I had access to the UCLA facilities as the spouse. So I would every day, as part of my sort of daily discipline, because I think exercise is very important to people, and particularly people in this business, and it should be part of your working day that you go and take exercise for half an hour, or though I would swim for longer. So I'd go to the UCLA swimming pool, and I'd lap for half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever, and ideas would come to me, and I would go back to the locker room and quickly scribble down anything that I didn't want to forget, and then I would go home, and gradually I started putting together building blocks that pertained to this story, and that's how one day it occurred to me that there was an undercover CIA officer working in this psychiatric hospital, because it is possibly the site of some nefarious goings-on by rogue intelligence agents. And so gradually the contemporary plot came together. And then I thought, well, it would be interesting if when she's back, when the contemporary girl is back in the past, whether she made some, because she is naturally a history student, she is able to use her understanding of history to, involve herself in what she sees as the political conspiracy, which there was a political conspiracy, let's say, to have the young Princess Elizabeth, before she became Elizabeth I, but during the reign of Bloody Mary, to have the young Princess Elizabeth accused of treason and therefore, either by exile or execution, denied access to the throne, because there were forces that wanted to keep Britain Catholic and not Protestant.
Right.
So, should she interfere with history? What are the consequences? Is there a butterfly effect, etc.? So various other ideas would come to me, quite often during swimming, and And I'm also, a fencer. I fence épée. So there had to be a duel scene. So gradually things sort of the building blocks started to assemble themselves. And somehow, out of that whole process, I wrote a screenplay that initially, got a good option. And I think I did 11 drafts ultimately to try and satisfy everybody.
11,
yes. And that is not uncommon, I would say, with writers. Writing is
not
rewriting. I'm sure you teach that.
Yes, rewriting is where it happens.
Yes. I mean, I could go. I could never totally finish the screenplay by just continuing to write and rewrite and rewrite. I think there comes a point when you have to say, well, okay, let's roll the dice on this.
Absolutely.
And that's what I have done. And
Brian, what happened?
With the novel, and people who read it like it. Obviously, is a self-published novel on Amazon. It's one of let's say 4 million books that you can access through Amazon and Kindle. So getting yourself to be noticed in a noisy and crowded marketplace is always a challenge. But anyway, people like it, and hopefully it can one day become a TV series, which would probably please me more than if it became a feature film, because it could be done with greater depth of character as a result.
Sure. Well, when you're working on something, you're 11 drafts in. What are the clues for you when you're working on all those drafts? What are the clues that you are either approaching or really at the point where you can take it out and show it to people and hopefully sell it? What tells you that you're at that juncture?
Well, I was showing it to people, and it got optioned at the third draft.
Wow.
It then went on to do all the other drafts, trying to take care of everybody's notes, which were often contradictory. So, that is something that every young writer that you help get started in the business through your lectures. That's something that he will face. Everyone has an opinion. Some opinions are well thought through, and some are just plain stupid.
Yes.
But if the person in power over the arrangement doesn't actually have the same grasp of the disciplines of screenwriting as you might have, then you're going to have to try and accommodate his views. This is a business which kind of attracts those of an egotistical nature, and I am one of such people. I'm very. I'm quite clear on what I want to do, and that I'm right to want to do it that way. I'm sure every writer feels that. And you just have to balance your natural ego drive and your belief in yourself to the needs to accommodate yourself to your inevitable partners in the project, because, well, they all have something at stake too. When you are Quentin Tarantino, you can do it entirely your own way. Very few people have access to the kind of budgets that he has been able to access, and the right of final cut. Spielberg, Scorsese, Clint Eastwood, and there were a few others. But they have proven that they can be right, most of the time, and therefore they're given that opportunity to have the work exactly as they want it. And that's fine. But most of us have to accommodate ourselves to the wishes of a committee, in effect, that will judge the screenplay, judge the casting, judge the movie, its editing, etc. And they may interfere with the creative process at any step along the way, because they feel they have to protect their investment. or their career reputation. No one wants to be the producer or the distributor of a flop.
No.
It's the quick and the dead in this business. It'll be a long time between drinks sometimes if you, as an executive, preside over a huge flop. Then you will be sidelined or fired, and it might take a while for you to get back onto the same strata of the business again.
Do you find it's the same thing when you've written the screenplay, or as opposed to when someone else has written the screenplay, in terms of the way that you're approaching it and the way that you're working with it and what your demands of that story are? Is it the same when you've written it, or is it as when someone else has written it, or is it different?
Well, I try to be as disciplined with myself as I am with the work of others.
Right.
I try to be fair to the work of others. There are many a screenplay I've been given that I say, well, I really don't think this works as intended. I think you should, steer it more in this direction. Or we can't make this screenplay on the budget that is available. We need to still keep it interesting and exciting, but we have to sort of write it back a bit because the second Chariot race is just, more than we can afford. So there are all sorts of reasons why, you might be rewriting someone else's work or requesting as director that they change the script accordingly. And look, I've had a great relationship with a writing partner, Dennis Pratt, who happens to be Boris Karloff's great nephew.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yes, and he looks, and you look him up as an actor on IMDb, and you can see the resemblance. But we've written a number of things together, and he has given me advice on a whole lot of things that I wrote or rewrote. So it's been a wonderful, 25-year relationship with another writer who has written some screenplays and a novel in his own right. Every screenplay is different, but in the case of Drive Hard, that went through a number of different script iterations. It was originally set in America. The way it could be financed as a co-production between Australia and Canada, the financial benefits of setting it up that way meant that it had to be reset in Australia, which with some American characters, but basically set in Australia with the remaining characters being Australian.
Right.
And a kind of a chase that went from California to Canada, or the border of Canada, did not make sense, let's say, in the Australian context, because every state in Australia is still part of Australia. It's not like you can get across the border to Mexico or Canada and you'll be out of jurisdiction.
Right.
So there are sort of key logic points that have to be adjusted when you change countries like that, and so forth. So there were two writers, the original two writers, that I actually, I didn't have dealings with because their deal was done and they had moved on, and there briefly was an Australian writer who did the sort of pure geographical transposition of the script to Australia, not necessarily taking care of some of the points I just mentioned. And so I came in and did the rewrite, and adapted it, therefore, to what I thought we could achieve in 18 days of photography. And also, most importantly, writing the script to satisfy the designated star, John Cusack, who had very definitive ideas as to what he would or would not do in this story. It was originally an action piece intended for Jason Statham, and then when he didn't bite, it was intended for Jean-Claude Van Damme. When he didn't bite, we were told, and this is before I came on board as a writer and director, we were told that there was a window of opportunity in his schedule between pictures that he could fit this one in. He could give us 14 out of the 18 days but by a certain date he had to go on to a David Cronenberg picture, much more important than the one we were making.
Yeah.
So if we could get we could get it shot by that day, and give him a screenplay that he was prepared to do, then it was off to the races. But so my draft incorporated a great deal of material that he wanted to do, and I kind of enjoyed that material. I like his anarchic sense. I like his attitude to politics, which he wanted to bring that into the script.
Right.
So I duly accommodated him in every regard, and as a result, he said, "Okay, I'm doing this," and we further embellished it, improvised, and did various things during our Fast and Furious shoot, which unfortunately didn't have a Fast and Furious budget. A film that seemed to be selling itself as a car chase movie could not afford to damage any of the vehicles. But that's the deal the producers made, and I had to live with it. The scene of the SUV flipping and catching fire is actually a stock shot. When you have black SUVs, it's quite easy to double them, even with the wrong make. But we were supplied with a stock shot by the distributor, and we added digital flames to it. So the only thing we were able to break was, we had a motorbike crash and it lay down, but it was. That was an easily repairable. That did not cost money so much to repair, but we couldn't have massive collisions and property damage. We were low budget property damage. Go through an arts and crafts fair and knock over some stalls. That was kind of the level of property damage that we could manage. But so the chase had to be, to a degree, the stunt of the near miss as opposed to the stunt of the massive destruction.
So did you I want to go back a half a step. Did you say you shot that movie in 18 days?
Yes.
That's
18 10-hour days.
That's amazing.
I guess that's part of my reputation.
It is.
I make decisions quickly, or that I have a plan, for the day, every day, and if things go wrong, I can adjust that plan and still get the most I can out of the day under the circumstances. That's just the nature of the business. And of course, obviously, digital photography does, that is faster than good old-fashioned 35 millimeter. You can use less light, need less equipment, etc. And you're not burning 35 millimeter stock processing and so forth. So some aspects of the digital revolution have been good for movie making, and though I liked tactile editing. When you could actually feel the film in your hand.
Yeah.
And that was
not anymore.
No, but that's okay. I mean, some people feel very strongly about the death of 35 mil. I mean, Quentin will not show a digital cinema print at his theater, the New Beverly in Los Angeles. There's not, is not set up for any kind of digital projection. It's only 35 millimeter or 16 millimeter.
Right.
And I understand that there is, a different response. I think the brain processes the visual information differently than when it is digital as opposed to 35 millimeter projection.
Yeah.
And 35 millimeter offers the information in a different way to the brain. I mean, anyway, I'm more interested in just getting the images, them looking as good as they can, and getting them into the film. So you have to, you have to really plan how to maximize your day. In Australia, it's a 10-hour day before serious overtime takes place. And actors are on an 8-hour day.
Wow.
Is the film as good as I wanted it to be? It's rare that ever happens. I mean, you never achieve perfection.
No, nobody does.
But I think it's an offbeat variation on a pretty tried and true formula. The Midnight Run, I guess, was certainly an inspiration of the original writers.
Sure.
An odd couple forced to to be together in the same vehicle, bicker and try and outwit each other, and it's a variation on that. It was certainly had to do some pretty fast thinking at times in the course of the piece.
It's a lot of planning.
The problem with it, of course, was the car that I had selected as the main vehicle in the chase. A nice 80s muscle car. Ultimately, was not able to drive very fast, and so when you have a title like Drive Hard, you're expecting some fast driving.
Yes.
And I think we didn't live up to expectations in that regard. And maybe I should have chosen a Ferrari, but everyone was terrified of what would happen if we did crash it. So I went for a distinctive car that wouldn't necessarily attract police attention, but was still distinctive and had that kind of retro quality added to the film. But, that was a decision that if I had to do over again, I would not do that. I would have tried to come up with another vehicle that could certainly really accelerate fast.
Well, Brian, we have been talking for a little more than an hour, if you can believe that, and I still have lots of questions, but we're coming to the end of the show, and I've got to ask you the last two questions that I ask everybody. So you clearly have worked for quite some time now and worked with lots of different people under lots of crazy circumstances and in many different situations. Are you able to share with us anything that would be fun for us to listen to, whether it's a quirky, offbeat, weird, funny, or just an oddball story from your past?
Well, so many to choose from, really. I guess one of the most extraordinary things that I remember happening to me on a film set was when Hollywood, icon of many decades, from the 40s, through the 50s and into the 60s, star of westerns and war movies and spy movies, Glenn Ford, who was then in his 60s. He was cast as a guest star in Day of the Assassins, a film you should not see, really. It's not. It does not represent my best work, and and I only had him for 2 days, and he was, shall I say, a pain in the arse. But that disappointed me because he was one of my screen heroes. But he. In a scene where he was meant to be shot by one of the other bad guys, and he told me, look, I have a mortal fear of firearms, of guns being pointed at me and being fired, even with blanks. I said, really? I mean, you played the fastest gun alive. You're reputed to be actually one of the fastest drawers. You're supposed to be a faster drawer than John Wayne. And he said, no, well, now I'm really scared of. I don't like having a gun that I know is loaded with blanks pointed at me. So can you please don't shoot me? I don't want to be shot in a wide shot where the gun is. You see the gun firing. I had actually hoped to, squib him and have multiple bullet hits, go off on his chest, in peck and pa fashion. But as the producers were so cheap, they required the actors to bring their own clothes. Dan Ford is not going to have his outfit, messed up in this way. But I thought, you had to pick the hill you die on, and this was not a fight that I was going to win. So I said, fine, I'll have a shot of him shooting, and I'll have a shot of you clutching your chest and sinking to the ground. And I duly did that, having done the wide shot, establishing the gun pointed at him with, having shown him that there were no blanks in the gun. So we got the 3 shots, and he came over to me and said, oh, thank you, dear boy, thank you, and gave me a hug, and then reached around gently and cupped my balls in his hand and gave them a gentle squeeze. Now, there was nothing gay about it, and he brought his third wife of 4 to the shooting in Mexico. He was just, it was like a kind of, mensch thing. You've been a good lad, and I guess in a way, it was a thank you gesture that kind of at the same time let me know that he had me by the short and curly the entire 2 days that we worked together.
Oh, that's hilarious.
With his insistence upon wearing dark glasses and his insistence upon having his lines on cue cards with the outgoing few words of the person to whom he was replying in one color in big bold letters, and then his dialogue in the other. And the dark glasses were there to prevent him from us seeing his eyes reading the script. So anyway, that was an interesting experience. But how many people get their family jewels given a nice gentle cupping by a Hollywood legend?
That is a great story. No, that would be true. Not very many. You would be among the rarer few.
Yes.
So finally, what?
He's gone to that great Hollywood studio in the sky now, and I wish him well. And he did give me a fabulous story to tell. And this is in front of the entire crew. Everyone could see this. And I just sort of shrugged it off. Oh, yes. Oh, thank you, Glenn. Thank you. And right, moving on now. So anyway, that was fun. But
fantastic.
generally, I get along very well with actors, and because you must.
Even if they don't,
their best and make them feel comfortable about performing.
Even if they don't cup your balls.
Yes, I don't. This is not a requirement I make of any actor or actress to do this. So I'd far rather, sit down with them later and have a glass of wine.
So finally, that was a great story. Finally, what is? Do you have a really good piece of advice or a tip for those who are upcoming in the business, or maybe they're in for a little bit but trying to get to the next level? What kind of advice can you lend?
Well, yeah, I would draw your attention to a line from my favorite sci-fi comedy, Galaxy Quest.
Yeah.
Never give up, never surrender. Persistence wins. You're not going to luck out like me, getting into the junior executive ranks at 21. You're not like. Well, I don't know, not likely to. Maybe you will. You're not likely to have your first demonstration of your filmmaking ability necessarily appreciated as quickly as mine was. The film that got me noticed was a 50-minute dramatized documentary about stuntmen called The Stuntmen, which won the Best Documentary Award at the Sydney Film Festival, and that established me as someone with an eye for action and who could write, produce, and direct and get financed a 50-minute documentary that was sold as a TV special across the world. So I was very lucky, but the main thing is persistence and constantly try to educate yourself in every aspect of the business. And if there's two words, that should govern your behavior throughout your career, it's make friends. And I don't mean kiss ass and suck up to people, because that's pretty evident. Its insincerity will not benefit you ultimately. But do people favors, hope they will do you favors. Most of them won't, but doesn't matter. Do them anyway.
Yeah.
And eventually, something will break. But assuming you have the level of talent that is necessary.
Right.
So you just have to keep studying and keep thinking, and just writing is rewriting. And back in the old studio days, shooting was reshooting. I mean, in the 30s and the 40s, sometimes studios could reshoot maybe 30, 40% of the film when they saw it assembled together, but they had all the actors on under contract, and he had all the costumes and all the sets that were, could be reassembled or left standing till they'd done the reshoots. I mean, people wanted to perfect the work, and that still happens today. And but look, the main thing is just keep trying and keep trying new things. And adapt to the changes in the marketplace. And so, now you can make a demonstration of your ability on your iPhone 10 and your editing software on your computer.
Absolutely.
So in that regard, your ability to make a demonstration, proof of concept, let's say, of you as a viable filmmaker that people can trust with their money. That is certainly cheaper than having to fund your own 16mm short, as you used to have to do maybe back in the 60s and 70s, as just your first sort of starting out of the gate endeavor. So that's one thing. It's just it's getting past the gatekeepers to someone who will recognize your ability and give you a shot. It happened to Steven Spielberg, straight out of UCLA Film School, and he managed to impress Sid Sheinberg at Universal, and he was then given an episode of Night Gallery to do as a result, and he did it. He was very meticulously planned and very confident, I think he directed Joan Crawford. I think
that's correct.
So, these breaks can happen. But ultimately, persistence wins. That's all I can really offer anybody.
Well, Brian, that is exceptionally valuable, all the pieces of advice that you just gave. And this has just been a masterclass in how to have a career that lasts and to make things the way that you sort of want to make them, at least most of the time. And I can't thank you enough for coming on StoryBeat today. It's been a real joy.
Well, it's been a pleasure for me, too. I'm honored to have the opportunity.
And so we've come to the end of today's StoryBeat. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great episodes to you. This podcast would not have been possible without the generous support of the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.